Tired of cycling coverage cluttered with ads and clickbait? Want in-depth analysis, honest reviews, and a community of like-minded riders? Escape Collective is different. We're member-funded, so you are our priority. Get exclusive bonus episodes, insider newsletters, and connect directly with top cycling journalists. I promise I didn't write that last bit. I am just reading the script out. Join us at escapecollective.com/join.
Welcome back to the Placeholder Podcast, everybody. I'm Caley Fretz. Joining me today from indoors, Jonny Long.
I'm here, I'm dry. I've got Wi-Fi. I'm ready to record a podcast. Jeez.
For those who weren't aware, last week Jonny was outside
in a party,
under an umbrella in the rain. So you might have heard some just tinging.
Sorry about that. It was very annoying when I checked, and I felt bad about myself.
Our good friend Will, our editor Will, pulled as much out as he possibly could, but we put Jonny inside this week. Also joining this week, Ronan and Laughlin. Welcome back.
I thought Jonny was going to do the whole Sean Kelly radio interview where he just nodded in response to a question there. You introduced him and there was a brief pause where he didn't actually speak, but he started pumping his fist, and I thought, yeah,
can't see
Jonny,
that.
you're going to have to say something in a podcast.
That's how we do things on Placeholders now. It's
just nod.
It's a non-verbal podcast, yeah.
Those bits are for members only.
Yeah.
Oh.
They get an explanation of what we're doing in the background. Anyway, let's get into the podcast.
Can I just say, I'm sitting slightly different for this podcast. I'm more upright and got my arms outstretched, and I feel very much like I'm about to go on like the 6 o'clock news or something. It's,
That is a vibe we're going
You do look
for,
a little bit like it. Yeah, you look quite professional over there.
Just happened. Definitely not that.
Let's talk about Tadej Pogačar. He just won the Giro d'Italia. That we're not super surprised by. We've got some other news, some other Giro news. We've got some Red Bull news. We've got some Visma news, some funky sponsorship stuff going on over there. We're going to hear a little bit later from our own Joe Lindsey about Olympic selection, and in particular some stuff that's going on here in the U.S. And we always manage to have interesting Olympic selection over here, and this year is no different. And then we'll talk a little bit of Dauphiné, and finally a little micro mailbag for Ronan, which is going to be in today's After Dark segment. But let's kick off with the Giro. We had a historic victory over the weekend. Tadej Pogačar won the Giro by 9 minutes and 56 seconds. Danny Martinez was second, followed by Geraint Thomas. Ben O'Connor with a solid ride in fourth.
There was a post that popped up somewhere in the last day or two, which had like the winning margins for the past 10 or 15 years, and they were all like either seconds or 1 minute something. And then you got Tadej Pogačar at the top, 9 minutes 56. Just to put it in a bit of context there. This is like in terms of modern cycling, that's not a gap you see a Grand Tour won by all that often.
What are you saying, Ronan? He's overcooked it for the Tour. Is that the steaming hot take you're arriving with today? Well, we've got you.
You're coming in about steaming hot there. I mean, I thought we were going to have a little bit of this discussion before you threw to me to...
Pogačar doesn't wait. I thought we'll get straight
We're going to wait.
We're going to wait?
We're going to wait.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah, Ronan's steaming hot turf can come a bit later.
Sorry, my bad, guys.
I mean, I don't know, guys. Like, we got a bit of stick from commenters on a piece that Dane wrote on Saturday. Because I think basically... Yeah, Dane got stick. Well, we'll talk about it anyway. But basically, it was from this sort of perspective that, like, when you see a performance like that, you cannot believe it, right? And I don't really want to rehash this entire conversation that we've had a couple different times, but I think that it's worth, I don't know, he just won by 10 minutes. Like, the last that comes even close to that I can recall was what? Was it Ivan Basso in 2000? It was the first one. It was 2006. He won by 9:18. Right?
Did
Ivan
he keep
Basso
that Giro?
Technically kept that Giro.
Okay.
But there were, I don't want to say anything that's going to get me sued over here. But there was other stuff that was happening at that Giro. There were interesting methods being employed and things. And, I think that it is not entirely unreasonable for people to sit back and just look at those two data points, right? And draw a line between them and say, how can you guys talk about this in a way that takes it in any way seriously? And I think that that's maybe worth addressing really briefly.
I have one more bit of context. Just while you were talking there, I was looking up on Pro Cycling Stats the biggest margin wins in Grand Tours. There's a list of the top 40. It doesn't go beyond 40th. And none of those top 40 are in the 1990s or the 2000s. And 40th goes down to 14 minutes and 18 seconds. So just above Pogačar's winning margin. It'd be useful if that went a bit further and we've seen how many Grand Tour wins above, say, 5 minutes we've had in the past 2 decades. But I think either way, it doesn't really change the conversation we're about to have.
I mean, that Giro stat, the one thing it misses is when Chris Froome came back and won it, when he brought back how many minutes it was, and then George Bennett said what he said. So you got to remember that. That's what I will say. At least Pogačar had the good grace to.
There's a difference with Jonny in that Froome at times in that Giro looked human. He was dropped on several occasions. He was losing time, and he did a superhuman effort to turn it around and win. He did a Froome, but he wasn't Pogačar throughout. Where I'm pretty certain that Pogačar is disappointed with this Giro because there was one day that he wasn't in pink.
Well,
first day.
And he said actually afterwards about how Juan Sebastian Milano didn't win a stage, so that was annoying. And then I also reckon he's probably annoyed, I wrote this in Spin Cycle this week, that he didn't win by a clear 10 minutes on the dot. Like if you're 4 seconds off, when you look down a result sheet and
Guaranteed.
Things match up really nicely.
He'd have been much happier with 9 minute and 1 second gap than a 9 minute 56.
Yeah.
Because 9 minute and 1, you're just over 9 minutes. You're not even thinking about 10, but 9:56, you're like, oh God.
Yeah.
If I had just celebrated a bit less, if I had less time counting to 5,
I'd
have won this thing by 10 minutes.
You guys listening to yourselves right now? I'm tired. The guy just won the Giro by 10 minutes. So again, I don't want to spend too much time on this, but I don't think you can have a performance like that and just ignore it, right? Because cycling is cycling, and cycling has its history. And like I said, the last time this happened at the Giro was Ivan Basso, and it was under highly questionable circumstances. And so I just think it's worth addressing, and I guess sort of putting my brief thoughts on this and why I feel like, we're not sitting here pounding the drum of doping, basically. The big one for me is that I'll say first and foremost, I just have no idea, right? I have no idea what Tadej Pogačar does at home. I have zero clue of the specifics of his preparation for this Giro, or how he, attains that watts per kilo. I don't know. And I think that that's really the problem. So when I first started covering this sport, which is, I don't know, in my head, it's not that long ago, but it's a long ass time ago, actually. It's like 2010. It was sort of the end of, Armstrong hadn't done Oprah yet, and we were still going through that whole process. And there was lots of smoke, even where there wasn't fire, right? Like there was in the press room, every single press conference was spicy, and you had riders refusing to answer questions, and you had all sorts of stuff that was still happening back then. It's like sort of just around the time the biopassport was coming in. There was a lot happening in the sort of anti-doping and anti-doping space within pro cycling. It is so different now, and there isn't really any indication other than performance that top riders are doping, right? And to me, like that's an output, not an input, and it's not really evidence, right? Like you can't really, because there's so many other factors that come into play. There's all the context of the race. There's who Tadej was racing against, all these other things that I don't know. I believe personally, as a host of this podcast, speaking to tens of thousands of you out there, it would be pretty irresponsible for me to just say, well, that just can't be done. It's got to be sketchy. I don't believe that is in any way journalism. The last time there was a kind of tetchy press conference that I can recall, it was because of you, Jonny, and Kate, right? At the Tour de France.
It was mostly Kate. Kate was the one who started it, asking Vingegaard.
So you and Kate asked the hard questions of Jonas Vingegaard and Van Aert, right? The question that you kind of have to ask just to see how they answer. And Wout van Aert in particular was displeased with you, quite displeased with you. Jonas Vingegaard was I don't know, a bit more circumspect. But my point in that small anecdote is that like we're not scared of this stuff. We're not scared of the questions. We're not scared of the reporting. We're not scared of trying to find out if bad stuff is happening. But at the moment, there is no indication that anything is, right? Other than an output, other than performance. And I don't personally believe that you can sort of draw a line between those 2 points in a way that is journalistically sound. And so that is why, if you're sitting out there and wondering why we're not sort of constantly questioning these performances, it's because there's no other evidence to support like a perspective that they are doping. Unlike 10 or 15 years ago, where there was lots of other things happening in addition to the incredible performances that pointed us in that direction. So that's what's changed between when I first started doing this and now. And I think that context is important.
We weren't at the Giro to ask Pogačar about, you are like traditionally at the Tour de France, you ask if, you can believe the performances that millions of people have just seen on the TV. At the Tour de France, if Pogačar is in yellow and doing similar things, even if he's slightly beaten Vingegaard, whoever it is, at some point he will be asked either by us or others whether we can trust in his performances. I remember his first tour, he gave not the best answers to that, but I don't know how much that was put down to him not being properly media trained and how to deal with those questions, or
and his English
wasn't as good. So that's one thing.
Also
is
like
that
6
we will.
Months old at that point.
Yeah, exactly. Like, so we will like if the trend continues and he doesn't have a bad day like he has in the past couple tours, right? Then we'll ask him and see what he says.
I'll just add to your point, Caley, that I think I speak for us all when we say we're open to seeing any evidence that may exist. But at least from my point of view, anyway, watts per kilo calculations on Twitter are get out the
garbage.
Yeah, like, I'm not even going to entertain those as like. Yeah, do not send those in as evidence. Those just pick a number and we'll go with that. Is about as accurate as those can be. But I am actually quite conflicted watching Pogačar because having been in the sport for a long time as well, on the one hand there is no evidence there, but on the other hand, there's all the history that we've all lived through, and you're kind of trying to watch something and understand it as best you can. And when you see Pogačar racing and you see the gap he has and the absolute dominance with which he races and the fact that he could try to win almost any stage, you're kind of saying this can't be real. But then on the other hand, you're looking at the competition, you're going, he's not really, like Danny Martinez has never been on a podium before. Geraint Thomas was probably on podiums before Pogačar was born. It's just, the competition wasn't there. And then at the same time, as unbelievable as it is, there are explanations that can explain what we're seeing here. There are other factors at play that weren't at play 20 years ago when they had blood bags and EPO to lean on. The only thing that I look at that team and have some level of unanswered questions, let's say intrigue and unanswered questions, is just some of the team management's history. And that's widely publicized. I think everybody will have the same questions, but unfortunately previous generations are still around the sport. I don't know if they've served their time or what, but that for me at least is when I see some of the people involved there, that there's nothing about Pogačar himself. I've never seen any evidence about Pogačar himself that raises serious question marks. But the same, unfortunately, can't be said for his team.
Mm-hmm. I think that's fair.
Yeah. No, totally fair. There's a number of individuals that have interesting pasts. But that is also true of almost every single professional cycling team.
Yeah.
Right. And it will be for at least another decade and a half plus, right? Like the riders who retired in 2010-ish, they're going to be in the sport for another decade or two or longer.
But we do have riders retiring from the current generation, TJ Vingegaard and others, who moving into these roles, hopefully with time, those things will change. And
anyway, not a super fun way to kick off this podcast, but can I give you cause for optimism? Yeah, it's the question on I think a lot of people's minds right now, and I wanted to be clear that we are not being negative here. We just wanted to sort of address. We've had a bunch of people reach out, basically, like in the comment section in Discord, et cetera, et cetera. We want to kind of address our perspective on this and our perspective on one of the most incredible performances in pro cycling in a very long time. Right. Unfortunately, due to the history of the sport, it requires some discussion.
I do maybe this is naivety, but some small part of me thinks as well, if he was something specifically very, very dodgy going on, might not have won it by that much. He might have just like toned it down a little bit.
Or be that chilled out about the whole thing and smiley. He might be a bit more
maybe
tense
that's reverse
and anxious.
psychology. I don't know, but yeah. I might not want to draw so much heat onto myself if I was doing something specifically dodgy.
The thing is, if he is dodgy and he's still that relaxed, it's like some sort of Patrick Bateman American Psycho style of like coping with it. You know what I mean? Like,
So
you can't.
that's one of the
Surely you
that's
can't.
one of the other things that's really changed since I started doing this job, right? Like the relationship between the media and the cyclists has changed hugely since sort of the middle of the EPO era, right? Because back then they all had something to hide. Almost all of them had something to hide, right? And so we were the type of people that they didn't really want to spend time with or chat with or be particularly friendly with, or like just the interviews were just tense and terse and it was different back then. And
because they were pinging.
that is that's not the case anymore. It just isn't. And granted, that's the weakest of weak anecdotal evidence, right? But it is part of a broader context of
As part of
what
their
we're
media
looking at.
training, Keelan.
Somewhat.
Look, we're not-
but they were media trained back then, trust me.
we're not
Even more
being
so.
we're not being like fanboys, but we're also not being like tinfoil hat Twitter conspirators.
As I
Like
said,
we're sitting on an uncomfortable fence where we'd probably like to know one way or another as well, and we're trying to figure out. But it's pretty hard unless you storm into hotel rooms and upend bags, isn't it?
And it's like I said, I think personally it's just irresponsible to sort of guess about things on a podcast or in written stories or anything like that. So as reporters and as journalists and as people who try to bring you accurate information, like I don't know what, there's not a whole lot we can do until there's actual information to impart. Right. Anyway, that's enough chatting about this. We're done. Let's talk about the Tour, because we have to talk about the Tour.
Ooh.
Right?
You don't want to talk about the Tour. You want to talk about Giro Tour double.
I want to talk about the Giro Tour double. I want to talk about Tadej Pogačar very likely being the first one to do it since Marco Pantani. There's another two
Very
points you
likely.
can draw a line between.
I can't believe,
Very
I
likely.
can't believe you're only talking about the double. Can we not talk Grand Slam
Ooh.
with the world champs at the end?
Let's leave that for
Okay.
August.
An Olympics road race.
So I
Quadruple.
personally think that Tadej Pogačar he's the odds-on favorite, so the betting markets agree with me. But if you look at this current start list for the Tour de France, and again, assuming Jonas Vingegaard is coming in a bit undercooked, if he's there at all, right, he probably wins this Tour de France. Now, Ronan's flaming hot turf. You disagree with me.
Well, we should say, first of all, that Dane has a piece on the website delving into
Yes.
this, and the fact that Pogačar had said in one of the press day rest conferences, that he was going to take it easy from that point on. Not take it easy, but he was going to race with one eye on the Tour. And I had put in our Slack that I thought that was him talking bullshit, because if this is Pogačar taking it easy or racing with an eye on the Tour, what does that mean? Dane had sort of explored whether or not he was racing with one eye on the Tour, and one scenario he didn't cover in that piece, which I thought was interesting, was just that personally I believe that Pogačar maybe wanted to race with one eye in the Tour and maybe didn't want to make such outlandish attacks and win by like 3 minutes in the second last stage when he already had a 6-minute lead. But he just can't help himself. And I, for one, think he may well pay the price for that come the third week of July.
You think?
So that your hot take is that he went too hard at the Giro. He's not going to do it.
Yes.
At which point do you think he looked like he'd taken it too hard? Because
I mean,
every time I
at
saw
no-
him, he wasn't even breathing.
At no point did he look like he took it too hard, but you cannot ride away from... I know I've already said, and not to contradict myself, that the competition wasn't there in the Giro, but those are still, Grand Tour
Geraint
riders
Thomas is
with-
still a
still
good bike
good.
racer.
Yes, you do not ride away from him on Monte Grappa and win by 3 minutes with 2 fingers in your nose, as the Belgians would say. That's he was not on a recovery spin, and Dane had explored well. Is he replicating a training camp? Is he having to do the efforts to maintain his fitness? I mean, if you look at like
Just doing intervals in the middle of the Giro.
yeah, like we discussed that in Slack also. I think what the point that I had made was that theoretically, at least, if you go by like performance management charts on Training Peaks and that, you can sort of detrain during a Grand Tour if the stages, if you're not getting a significant enough workout on each of the stages and you're sitting mid pack all day, theoretically at least your CTL may well go down, your chronic training load. Not to get too nerdy on it, but I don't think that's what was going on, and I don't think he'd have been too concerned about that. Who knows? Maybe he was, but I just don't think you can ride away from riders like that. No matter how good you are, no matter even if you're Tadej Pogačar, that is an effort. That is an effort that's coming after 20 days of racing will have been taxing, and I don't think it was an effort that he needed really to make in that scenario. And I think, as much as none of us probably would have wanted to see it, a boring Pogačar, it might have been a much better approach than all guns blazing that we did see.
He's got to keep it interesting, otherwise everyone starts asking the doping questions. It's 4D chess.
Well, I mean, I'm full on contradicting myself on every point I make here, but
why don't you do that as a performance process episode, like how to best optimally train and ride the Giro and Tour to try and win them both? Or are you about to tell me it's just rider to rider?
And I'm just not sure who the expert would be. I mean,
Pogačar.
Pantani was the last to do it. So.
And yeah, you can't really...
Yeah, times have changed a little bit.
Reach out to Pogačar and ask. I did reach out to. I believe he's his former coach now, but still involved with the team, just not directly coaching Pogačar anymore. Yeah, it reached out to that individual, and if we get any insight into actually how hard the Giro was, we'll write that story up. I think that'd be fascinating. The one, because that's the big question right now. It's just like, how can you? Can he recover fast enough? It's not that much time. It's less than a month, right? And can he recover fast enough and then sort of then rebuild, right, into Tour fitness?
To clarify my position, I think he might get away with it this year because of Vingegaard's current condition is just unknown, and will he even be at the Tour? But the examples that spring to mind for me are does every time Pogačar goes all guns blazing, whether it be the start of Paris-Nice, the start of the Tour de France, or the Tour last year, where he was attacking on every opportunity to try and gain seconds, and then fast forward to the third week and he's on the radio saying, "I'm dead." And obviously he had a broken wrist in the Liège before that. His run-in was compromised and all that. But that it's a similar thing where you've got a certain amount of bullets to burn, and whether Pogačar only burned one bullet in the Giro or he burned an entire box of matches, I'm not saying bullets, I'm trying to say matches. Burned an entire box of matches, and now he has to refill that box before the Tour, and maybe it doesn't get fully filled again. I don't just know. But what I do know is that didn't have to make that many efforts in the Giro, and he could well pay for those, is my theory.
Yeah, I mean, the rules of physiology still apply, right? Even if you're that good. It's energy out is still, your body still has to deal with it. I think he's going to win, but again, I think he's going to win not necessarily because he's going to be at his best, but because his 95% will be enough to win this Tour de France. I think that's basically where I'm at.
Just in case he doesn't win, I'm going to say I told you so now, and point to 2 years ago when he was in the yellow after Planche de Belfi, and everybody thought the Tour was over, and then I wrote a piece saying that the Tour is not over. There's reason to be cheerful because Jonas Vingegaard or Primož Roglič could easily win this thing, and then lo and behold, Vingegaard won. So I told you so.
I picked in that Tour as well. if we're giving ourselves our flowers. Primož Roglič erasure. I accidentally left him out the other day in an article talking about people who could beat Pogačar at the Tour. Primož Roglič. No, we've just forgotten him.
No, I haven't forgotten him. He's in my draft team sitting on 200 points or something. Come on.
He's waiting for the new Red Bull kit that's going to be silver and blue and red.
I hope he's getting the Red Bulls in, that's for sure.
Let's move on from the Giro Tour Double. We've got a month to talk about it. So we'll probably return to that a couple different times, including when we get closer to the Tour de France, which is going to kick off in Florence this year on the 29th, I believe, something like that. Anyway, we got a couple of things. So real quick little news tidbit here. So the Giro might be going to Albania. What is this, Johnny?
Yeah, it's a story from Cycling News. I think they picked it up at the end of the Giro, talking to various people, maybe within our RCS Sport, people who know. So the story stemmed from the Giro had vague plans to go to Saudi Arabia for a Grand Tour at the start of the Giro. They went to Israel the other year, and Saudi Arabia can probably pay a decent wedge more than Israel, you'd imagine. But that's off because of war and all the other things going on. Albania could be another destination for 2026. 2025, I think they might be starting Trieste. And they also might be heading over towards Slovenia. So Pogačar could go back to the Giro. That I think that was from Gazzetta. But yeah, interestingly, Giro start in Albania, anyone? It's sort of like the Stag Do Giro vibes when they went to Budapest the other year. So just trading it for somewhere else.
I don't really know that much about Albania, to be perfectly honest.
No, neither. Nothing I can say on a podcast.
There you go. Giro might be going to Albania. The Giro likes popping around to different places. I think that would be an interesting one. Yeah,
it's fun.
I like Grand Tour starts in other countries.
It's also like you're a bit excited about it. Whereas when like the World Tour, the Tour is like we're going to the Netherlands. Like no disrespect to the Netherlands, but has anyone ever been excited about that apart from Dutch people and like very heavy sprinters and Ronan?
Ronan loves it.
Belgium,
Ronan loves
Netherlands. Yeah.
I mean, the Giro was talking about coming to the U.S. for a while.
Was
about
it?
doing like a Washington D.C. stage?
Why DC?
And then, because they have to go East Coast just for time zones, right, and like shorter travel. But I think it was D.C. or they may be talking New York and D.C. I mean, it didn't. I don't think it got very far. Yeah, they were talking about that for a while. That would be fun. I would go to D.C. see the start of the Giro. I mean, right near there is Richmond, that hosted the World Championships in 2015. Richmond's not that far outside D.C. Couple other news bits here. So we got some more transfer rumors. And by the way, we've got some juicy transfer rumors in the women's peloton, but we're going to pull Abby into the pod next week to talk about all those. Rumors are that Red Bull, and reminding everybody that Red Bull now owns a portion of Bora, are lining up Van Aert, Evenepoel, and Pidcock. Ralph Denk, the GM over there, has denied this. He said that they're going to respect various long-term contracts. I don't believe him. But I also don't believe that Red Bull is going to be able to get those three over the line.
They probably will sign them, yeah, but just then they'll just not take them to the biggest races. They'll just inexplicably leave them at home.
You got a little problem with Bora over there, Ronan? What's going on?
No problem with Bora. Problem with their selection policies. Not a problem. No, I'm just intrigued by it. It's just time and time again.
Provide me an example of a foolish selection from Bora Hansgrohe.
Which Sam do you want me to use? The most recent Sam? Or
I knew this was a Sam-based thing.
There's it had to be a Sam bit.
Sam.
Either Sam.
I've forgotten the surname now.
Welsford?
Yes.
Bennett?
Yes. Sam Welsford. Cracking start to the season and then just inexplicably gets left at home. I mean, you can't really criticize that because Martinez runs second and overall did Van Poppel help him? I'm not sure, but it just, there's just something weird about that team signing sprinters to go to big races and then not taking them to those races, but still taking the lead-out train, which is the part that confuses me. It's like, we're going to take the lead-out train, we're just not going to take the conductor at the back of the train or the front of the train or whatever.
But would they have beaten Milan or Malia?
Not if they're not there, no, definitely not.
Oh, I see.
If they're there, point. I mean, Van Poppel is, I'm sorry to be blunt about this, but Van Poppel is not going to beat them whether he's there or not. If you bring a Welsford or a Bennett, they may well beat them if they're given the opportunity. That's the perplexing part of it for me.
Well, Red Bull, Bora Hansgrohe are not going to sign all three of Evenepoel, Van Aert and Pidcock, even though their contracts I think are staggered. It's like 26, 27, 28 when they expire maybe. No matter how deep your pockets are, how do you fit them in with a Roglic?
Well, that's the question for me.
Roglic will retire soon.
Red Bull could definitely afford to sign those riders, but would those riders sign on if the other names were there also?
Van Aert probably would.
That's my issue with it. I mean, but the problem is those riders are it's not that they're too similar. It's that they do have similar goals, right? So like, even if they want to get different things out of a Tour de France, they all want to be at the Tour de France every year to win the things that they want to win. And you start to put that team together. And yes, it's a team of superstars, but like, where's the cohesion? Who's getting bottles, right? If you've got those three and Roglic, who's getting bottles? There's no one getting bottles, right? You got three other riders. Like it just starts to not really.
If that
work.
Is the approach,
it is
that
still
they
a team
want
sport.
To just sign these superstar riders. It's surprising that Red Bull didn't buy a movie star, because like that team has a long history of having too many leaders and too few
experts in the field. Okay, well, thinking of theories of how it would actually work. Okay, Pidcock, Ineos is clearly like not doing it for a bunch of their guys. Like you have talent just willingly leaving there, both in the management side and the rider side. Things are afoot. Big Jim and Sir Dave are over at Manchester United deciding whether to sack a manager who's just won a trophy. We can't explain it. We don't need to. It's crazy. Wout van Aert, he's Mr. Red Bull in Belgium and probably Northern Continental Europe. He's on all the adverts. There's probably enough money there to persuade him. And he can probably do the same thing, right? That he does at Visma Lease Bike.
Yep.
Remco, Evenepoel. There's already like Soudal Quickstep's already hanging on with, will they get taken over? Do they carry on? Like, you've got to think, where do the riders go? Because if Visma Lease Bike disappear, then UAE is the only other team with not just loads of money, but clearly the ability to support them in terms of performance, where they can maintain or increase their level.
I think that's where it falls down in the Van Aert theory, is that for Van Aert now, he is Mr. Red Bull, whatever. We don't know what's going to happen to Red Bull cyclists in the World Tour outside of Bora Red Bull or whatever it's called. But if you're Van Aert right now, the only thing that matters, the only thing outstanding on your Palmares is Flanders and Roubaix.
Yeah.
Are you going to up sticks and move to another team that has no history in being successful in those events, just as the team that you're with, that you brought from having, that you joined when they were like, when Van Aert joined Visma, it was surprising. Okay, back then it was Jumbo or whatever. It was a surprising move. It was like you could go anywhere and you picked this team. But that team has transformed the past decade to being a team that, despite always somehow managing to grasp defeat from the jaws of victory every year in the Spring Classics, they do look like they could win one of those monuments. And surely Van Aert is the man to do that.
But his coach went with Roglic, didn't he? Over to Bora. Did the coach not go? I can't remember.
Yeah, coach moved over.
Either way. Right. Well, maybe he just doesn't want to wear the 124 sponsors that he's going to have to wear at this year's Tour de France.
Good little segue there, Johnny. All right, so explain this. What did Visma come out and we're going to have some Androni Giocattoli Visma action?
Yeah, the headline is that Lisa Bike, the second name sponsor, Lisa Bike, not Visma, will be offering a total of 124 sponsorship spots on the Visma Lisa Bike Tour de France kits this summer. So the theory
124.
is... Yeah. Presumably this is from... This will be...
a very specific number.
Yeah, maybe
for being such a random number.
They've got their rulers out and divvied up the plots of Jersey.
So is it that like it'll be done in that sort of artistic design way that all the other brand names will come together, and when you look at it from afar, it looks like it says Lisa Bike, but when you get in close, it actually says loads of different
like
names.
How people burn slices of toast slightly differently to make a big picture of Jesus or something.
Not sure Jesus will be happy in a Lisa Bike jersey.
What if it's a different set of sponsors each stage?
That is a lot of wasteful kit.
I'm imagining it like, do you ever play Sporkle when you have to guess the logo?
There's only 21 stages. Okay.
Oh yeah, that's true.
Yeah, but 20 what's 100? What was the number? 124.
Yeah, that is
divided by 21.
Oh god, maths.
5 point something. 5.8.
Yeah. Just under 6 logos per day per kit.
No, I think it's going to look like a Sporkle quiz where people will know what I mean, where it's just going to be like a grid system of all of the logos and it's going to look rubbish.
I think it's just going to look terrible, yeah.
I'm looking forward to it, to be honest.
I mean, that's par for the course with Visma and their Tour de France special jerseys.
What colours?
Yeah, what did they do last year? They did something about stars.
Ride Your Dreams, and they had a gold bus.
Ride Your Dreams. Yeah, not a fan. Really not a fan. Wow. We'll find out how much it costs.
One of those 124 spots could Escape Collective get ourselves onto the jersey.
We should.
Or maybe not Escape Collective, maybe just placeholders.
Now, Movistar,
could placeholders hold a place on one of those 124 spots?
Movistar, I reckon you give them like a couple grand in an envelope and they'll just like print it on the day. You can have Enric Mas falling off the back of a GC group and all you see is a big E, big orange E.
I just love the idea. Like, you guys are familiar with the Androni Giocattoli kits, right? Like the classic Gianni Savio. It's an Italian. It's been continental, pro continental. It's been sort of all the various like sub World Tour levels of bike racing, and it just famously has so many sponsors.
It's like NASCAR, isn't it? It's like a NASCAR.
It is like NASCAR, and from what I understand, actually, some riders, it's kind of like a pay rider system. So if you bring a sponsor, you can ride for the team. You have to be like at least close to good enough, right? But
no, you don't.
If you're close to good enough, you have to be at least like capable of finishing a bike race. I'm sure. No? Okay. Are you speaking from experience, Ronan?
No, I just know that the deeper your pockets are, the less
it matters.
The less able to finish a bike race you have to be.
So what often happens is riders will show up and it'll be like some major company from their hometown, right? Like supporting their move into the professional ranks or whatever it is. Like the local concrete company. And so then the local concrete company has a logo on Androni Giocattoli's kit. And it's kind of great. This doesn't really run alongside what Visma, their brand. Generally, they're sort of like clean Northern European. It's somewhat in contrast.
There is a Belgian equivalent, Androni Giocattoli. That's Lambo Credit, and they had good riders. They had like Sven Nys, they had others, but it was also a team where you could pay your way, bring in a sponsor, get on the jersey, pay your way. The sponsor would pay, I don't know, whatever the minimum wage is for a pro Conti rider. Say it was 30 grand back in the day. The sponsor pays 40, 50, whatever. And the team has to pay the rider 30. Or the sponsor pays 30, the team pays 30, and then the rider pays back some proportion of that 30. But I do know there's one example where I think it was around, so like the Ian Stannard and Geraint Thomas. Ian Stannard definitely, maybe not Geraint Thomas, rode for Lambo Credit, and at one point, if I understand correctly, the British Cycling were effectively buying a slot on that team from Lambo Credit to have Ian Stannard there as a development pathway. It was probably a lot cheaper than setting up their own development pathway in Belgium. That was before Team Sky days, and then the same happened where Lambo Credit had seen that British Cycling were heavily lottery funded, assumed the same worked in Ireland, approached a couple of Irish riders to sign. They're like, oh, get your lotto to pay for your space in this team. And I was like, that's not how it works in Ireland.
The pay rider thing is quite an interesting angle. Like we haven't talked a whole lot about that on this podcast, but it's still relatively prevalent. It's not so much in like the World Tour teams that we talk about a lot, but in some of the lower teams, I mean, these programs are just desperate for cash. And so they're more desperate for cash than they have sort of pride in picking the best riders, right?
I mean, obviously,
so
Ian
it happens all the time.
A heck of a rider, and maybe they just
that's kind of a different situation.
But that's entirely different. Yeah,
I kind of prefer it to like having the petro states or big bad businesses doing it. It's like in the same in UK football, where lower down the leagues you'll have like fans of the team, but who also run like, I don't know, like an electrician, and then they will just sponsor a player for the day. Or sponsor the match ball even, just for that one day. And it's a lot more wholesome for sport, right?
Actually, speaking from my own experience, the other way you can get yourself on a UCI registered team is there's a little known UCI rule that says that whatever country the team is registered in, there has to be X percentage of the riders on the roster from that country. So if you happen to be a young cyclist who is Irish and there's a new Irish team getting set up and they need Irish riders,
pick up the phone.
And that is an avenue. That is an avenue that I've explored.
And then one year you can end up on a stamp. That's where it'll take you.
For the other years you get stamped all over, but 1 year you can end up.
1 year it's all worth it. Yeah.
Oh God, I for one look forward to seeing how Visma Lease Bike fits 124 sponsors onto their kit. I'm sticking with 6 per day. New kit every day.
We should
wildly
try and
wasteful.
Stick our logo stickers onto the kit and see if anyone notices.
Oh. Just get Ian to print off a whole bunch, see if we can just stick them on there as they go by.
I bet you the Bastissimo boys will be trying to do that. Yeah.
Give Sepp Kuss a big pat on the back.
Oh, he would definitely. Yeah, we could definitely do that. We could get close enough to Sepp Kuss.
He'd be all about it. All right, let's take a quick break.
Caley, over the weekend, I met a listener called Tom who said the one thing he doesn't like about this podcast is how you say we're going to take a quick break and then we don't take a quick break. So how do you...
we just keep going?
Yeah, how do you answer these accusations?
Well, today we're going to actually take a quick break and talk about something else just for a moment. You have a new podcast. You have a podcast coming.
Yeah, there you go. Now we're actually going to have a break and plug something. But hopefully it's something you enjoy. I've been working on a new podcast called Ultra. It's about the ultra scene, bike packing, just kind of crazy people doing insane things on bikes. So we're launching this week. Our first interviewee is Leah Wilcox, who's going to try and beat or break the women's around the world record. So she set off from Chicago earlier this week, heading east, and she's got 110 days is her goal. But we've already recorded other episodes with a guy who works 9 to 5 remotely, and in between is trying to ride around the world himself, but just much more slowly. So he'll like work Monday to Friday and then just like ride fairly far over the weekend and then find himself in a new place. So it's those sorts of stories, right? Hopefully people are interested in that. If you are, check it out. Kind of a bit of an experiment.
Where can you find it?
Good question. I should have said that. It's going to be on the Everything feed, I think. Do we call that externally as well as internally? So just where you get your...
Yeah, sure. If you're subscribed to the feed where you get all the podcasts, like this podcast, Geek Warning, et cetera, it'll be in that feed. It will not have its own feed.
No.
Basically.
Until we figure out.
So whether you're on the member one or the free one, it will drop into both of those. But if you're listening to this on a feed that has lots of different shows, then, which you probably are, because most placeholder listeners listen to that feed, then it'll show up. It'll show up probably about 6 hours after this episode shows up.
Hopefully, if not something's gone wrong. It'll also be on YouTube. Yep. So you'll be able to watch it. If you like to, sometimes there are certain podcasts I watch. So there's the two talking heads. There's a few other visual elements that I've added in that hopefully aren't too insane that Caley makes me take them out. And there's a written article, which is not just the transcript. It'll have some more, context and learnings. So yeah,
check it out.
Let
us know what you think.
That was the break. Now back to the podcast.
That was a good break.
Question.
Can I just point out that quick break was much longer than when you don't do a quick break? There was nothing quick about that.
This is a first. Ronan's getting on at me for brevity.
I have to take the chances when they're presented.
So if I take a quick break and it's too short, I get yelled at. And if I take a quick break and it's too long, I also get yelled at. I don't know what you want here, Ronan. Should we go make the rest of a podcast?
I don't really want anything to change. I was just pointing out the irony of trying to avoid a quick break, you make a long break.
Look, I took my chance and I went for it, and probably put people off actually listening to it than if I'd said nothing.
That was an ultra break.
Nice.
Let's go back to the actual podcast. Wow, that was a great break, guys. Good break. I enjoyed that.
Relaxed and ready to go for part B.
While we were gone doing our little promo, somebody snuck in the back door. Joe, welcome. He's just been sitting here waiting for us to finish breaking, basically. So the reason we called you in here, Joe, is because we wanted to talk a little bit about Olympic selection and some of the stuff that's going on, particularly with the American Olympic selection. And I know a lot of you out there are not Americans, so maybe you care slightly less, but it has some sort of entertainment value nonetheless, because let's be honest, it tends to be a bit of a junk show. Pretty much every Olympic cycle, there's always people arbitrating and people suing and there's all sorts of crazy stuff happening. Joe, what's the headline from this year?
Well, I think the headline, honestly, is that this is, like you said, this is the Olympics. This is where this stuff happens. And it's not just the U.S. I mean, we saw just this week that the Ecuadorian Olympic Committee, or the National Cycling Organizing Body, has selected Jonathan Nava as its lone men's road race participant over the defending Olympic champion Richard Carapaz, which Carapaz is obviously not very happy about. So this is not an exclusively American thing, and that's something that we'll get into here. Is that the issue is that this is the Olympics. It's a big deal, and there's just not that many spots for people. And so there's a lot of fighting over those spots, and there's a lot of talk about the fighting over those spots.
This year, to sum it up really quickly, a triathlete is going for cycling, right?
Right.
Taylor Knibb.
So at the U.S. National Championships road race and time trial, there was a automatic spot on the Olympic team held out as a grand prize for the winner of the men's and women's time trials. I think on the men's side, there weren't too many surprises with that. Brandon McNulty more or less ran away with it with about a minute advantage over second place. But for the women, I think a lot of people expected that Kristen Faulkner or maybe Amber Nevin, who's kind of a time trial specialist, would get that spot. Instead, it was Taylor Knibb, who is one of the best short course and half Ironman triathletes in the world, who emerged as the winner 11 seconds ahead of Faulkner, and thus grabbing the spot, not just for the time trial, but also the road race.
Sorry, go ahead, Ronan.
Can you just explain that part, Joe, and that the winner of the time trial is also getting the road race spot? Was there no option to have because the winner of the time, you won the time trial, that's probably an argument that you deserve that spot in the time trial, but there was no argument there that this person who has never done a road race would be entitled to a road race spot. Could they not have swapped out after the time trial?
That is an excellent question, and the answer comes down to basically There's only 2 spots available for the U.S. women. And when the criteria were created, this is sort of the fourth dimensional chess that basically that governing bodies have to play, is USA Cycling had to publish the criteria for this 24 months ago, which is before they knew how many spots they were going to have for these events, before anybody knows, because these basically the qualification criteria closes on various windows for various sports. So for women's road racing, it closed basically with the end of last year's World Tour season last October. For the mountain bike race, that closed last weekend at Nova Mesto, the World Cup. So it's like there's all of these different sort of deadlines and qualification criteria at the Olympic level that national basically governing bodies have to take into account when they publish their criteria. And then they also have to publish that criteria based on how do we think we're going to do in certain events? How do we think our competitors are going to do? Like every single governing body, right, wants to go out and win Olympic medals. That's what they want to do. So they're going to maximize their choices around this. And I talked with Jim Miller, who's the head of performance at USA Cycling, to get a little bit more context into this. And he said that basically every Olympic cycle, they go through a competitive analysis of where they are in different disciplines and events and where they think their competitors are. But that has to take place like 2 years out, because that's when they have to publish these criteria. And it's just a very inexact science.
Isn't there also something that it's not actually spots in these events that is the problems? It's actually how many beds they're allocated for cycling in the Olympic Village. And in some ways, in that you get X amount of cyclists, or you get X amount of beds for cyclists, and then those cyclists then need to be divvied out amongst your spots in the road race, your spots in the time trial, your spots in the track. But if you've got a better chance in the track, you might give up one of those spots in the road race to a track rider, because they can do both, but they're actually going for the track.
Potentially. So this is one of the interesting fourth dimensional chess things that Jim explained, is that they can take a rider from their track and put them into the road race. But if you qualify on the road team, you can't go into the track. So they have to pick from which side. And this is an ILC UCI thing. This isn't an internal USA Cycling decision. They basically have to figure out okay, we can take one rider from a track team and they can do a road event, but that's it. They can't necessarily take other athletes and put them and take from the road into the track, or mountain bike into track. And so this is why, in 2012, you ended up with these absolutely comical situations, like Robert Forstemann, the German sprinter, Quadzilla. He's a match sprinter. And he started the mountain bike race because they had a spot and they needed a rider to put in the spot. And so he's sitting there, this giant hulking man who has no business. He's going to break that mountain bike in half. And he rolls out, and after basically the start, he just DNFs because he's I'm here for track racing. That's it. So that's where you get these silly situations like this, and that's very Olympics.
Can you take from triathlon into time trial?
No, because they're different sports. Yeah. So Taylor Knibb has already qualified for the U.S. triathlon team. So she's going to join this very elite group of people who've ever competed in 2 sports at an Olympics. And I think at quite a bit smaller group that's competed in 2 totally different sports at the same Olympics.
Wow.
And the total number of cyclists in the Olympics also keeps shrinking, right? It's slowly shrinking, because we have to make room for breakdancing and other things.
Surfing. The horse sports. Don't forget the horse sports.
Horse sports.
How many beds do a horse require?
Many.
But that goes back to Ronan's point about beds in the Olympic Village and stuff. There's only so many athlete spots across so many different sports at the games, and the IOC has to sort of manage that, and that's why you get a situation where the time trial is going to have 35 starters. The road race is going to have 90 starters for the men's and women's. That's, for time trial, that's like a third of the level of the people who started at recent world championships. The road race fields are half the size of world championships. Well, and they're just noticeably smaller.
And they're actually even smaller, right? Because you're going to lose a third of that group the first time they go up a hill. Because the way that it's all spread out to different countries, you got countries that don't produce at the moment a whole lot of cycling talent who still have spots in the Olympics. And I remember watching when I was down in I covered Rio, and I was out on course on literally the second climb of the day, and the men's race went by, and there was already 40 dudes off the back. right? And so effectively, you're talking about road races that are 50 people.
That was the track sprinters.
Realistically. Right. It was Robert Forsterman hanging out in the back somewhere.
Right. But no, that's a really good point. It's like the whole, like one of the big goals for the Olympics, right, is to try to expand opportunities to countries that wouldn't normally qualify. So if you have riders who meet the minimum Olympic qualification standards for different events, like for track events, you know, I think for match sprint, you have to do, I think it's like a sub 12-second flying 200 or something like that. Don't quote me on that. But like there are Olympic qualifying standards. You can't just rock up just as anybody and be like, sweet, I'm representing Mongolia in the match sprint. But if you do meet those standards, then those countries get those spots and they get spread out. And that's why the U.S. women only have 2 spots for the road race. And why even the Dutch don't have, it's not like World Championships where you have a 6-rider team. It just doesn't happen at the Olympics.
I remember speaking with a guy named Brian Babylonia who represented Puerto Rico, which obviously comes separate from the United States.
Yeah, that's a puzzler.
Yeah. Let's not get into that.
Right.
But anyway, so he was there. He was literally like, I mean, he was a good bike racer, right? Like he was a very good bike racer, but he was not like a world tour level bike racer. He just won what was effectively like the state championships of Puerto Rico and then got to go to Rio, right? So like that's Sweet. The kind of thing which is an amazing story. Like I was out at the course really early and he was there, like he was on the start line,
ready
like
to go.
2 hours and 45 minutes before
That's part
the
of the
race
fun
started.
of it though, isn't it?
It was fantastic. Like it was one of the most enjoyable interviews I had the entire time I was down there. So I'm not, to be clear, I'm not opposed to this. It just makes it a little bit less of a sporting spectacle and a little bit more of like a cultural spectacle and things like that.
I know USAC get a fair share of flack. I'm not all that aware of USAC, so I can't really comment on that. But I do know, having been involved in cycling Ireland a bit and having narrowly missed out on Olympic qualification rather than Olympic selection, let's say, when I was by no means Olympic standards. I know how the system can work. And it is actually quite difficult to get it right because on the one hand, you're looking at sports like football and you've got the European Championship coming up and England have to pick a team. Their manager Southgate leaves out some of the big names. Those big names, they don't turn around and sue the FA, or take them to court to try and win a space, which almost always happens with every selection process that Cycling Ireland goes through. I don't know if Cycling Ireland are doing it badly or what, but I do know they are doing it badly, but anyway, that's another point.
Same in the US.
So in some ways, the national federations, they have to have these criteria. They can't just turn around and say, we're picking the best team and this is the best team. Unfortunately, it would be much easier if it could work that way, but the unfortunate part of that is that ultimately that gives no grounds for appeal, or it is open to misuse or whatever if it is just as simple as this guy is a manager or this woman's a manager and they are picking the team.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like the Dutch maybe do it that way, but I don't know exactly what their system looks like. But yeah, in the US, there's arbitration basically every single time, and that was actually the nice thing about the way that they did it this cycle, which is like, hey, if you win these things, you're in. Kristen Faulkner has a very strong case that she is the correct person to bring to the Olympics, but she didn't win that time trial, right? So she would lose an arbitration. That doesn't mean she won't race because she's on the track list and everything that Joe is explaining. There's like other ways in, but it would be easier in a lot of ways if Jim Miller could just be like, these people are just going. I guess my follow up, my last question here on this, Joe, is what is this actually going to end up looking like? Like, will the U.S. have 2 women in the road race? Because Taylor Knibb has said not an official sort of decision, but is not going to race the road race. Right, it's too close to her other events. So are we only going to have one rider in the road race? And if that one rider is Chloe Dygert, who is the other rider who already auto-qualified, and Chloe's not particularly into road racing either. So like, is effectively the U.S. going to have almost nobody in the road race? Like, how does this end up?
I think the answer to that is it's Kristen for sure and probably Chloe in the road race. You're right. Taylor has said her decision is not official announced yet, but she said she has no real interest in doing the road race because while she races draft legal triathlon, she does not have experience in road races. She just understands it's not the right place for her. I think, Kristen had been racing some with the Team Pursuit squad already this winter. She raced in Adelaide at the Track Nations World Cup. with that group. And so she will race probably team pursuit with them and then also do the road race. Taylor will do the time trial along with Chloe, but I think it'll be Chloe and Kristen for the road race.
One last point of clarification. Why was it decided that the time trial would select both time trial and road race spots? Why didn't they just say that it'll only select the time trial spot?
I'm so glad you asked that.
Because it's America. We love time trials.
That comes back to the number of spots that they have available to them and sort of the little process that they go through determining like where are our best medal hopes. So like Caley, you mentioned this about the guy from Puerto Rico that he rocked up to the start line 2.5 hours early. And that's the thing about the Olympics that's different is like people give a damn about the Olympics. Athletes give a damn about the Olympics that they don't in a way for world championships because it's once every 4 years. Like Jim told me, he said basically the only exception to that is sometimes with men's road racing where like the Olympics isn't the apex of the sport. But for every other person, every other discipline, there's nothing like the Olympics. And so they look at it from a standpoint of like, who's our best medal hope? If we don't have a medal hope, do we have someone who we can put on the team who will help us achieve? Or like, okay, we don't have more than one medal hope, but we have 2 spots. For that second person, how do we pick that person in a way that helps to sort of satisfy our strategic objective and our competitive possibilities for that? So if you've got Kristen Faulkner, who's your best hope for the road race, then if Chloe does the road race, how does Chloe help put Kristen in a position to potentially medal there? That's the criteria. If you don't have that, then you're talking also about basically like, how do we get someone who we think will be medal competitive at some point to this event now so that they can have that experience where they're going to go to the opening ceremonies, even though it's the day before their event, and they're going to hang around the Olympics, the athlete village and have that whole Olympic experience. Because what Jim said is that even for experienced professional athletes, when they get to the Olympics the first time, it's like this light bulb moment where it's like, oh, this is different. And they get wrapped up in that. Like he said, for like BMX racers, for instance, he's like, these people are used to competing in basically like empty stadiums. And then you rock up to the Olympics and there's 5,000 people watching and NBC Sports is off in the wings waiting to talk to you. And even if you've won multiple world championship medals, it's different. And so like for the men's mountain bike is a good example where you've got Chris Blevins is obviously going to get one of those spots. And then you've got Riley Amos and Bjorn Riley. And Jim said, he's like, I don't care which one of these kids necessarily gets the spot. But he's like, one of these guys is going to be potentially on our LA Olympic team. We want to get them that experience now so that when they go to LA in 4 years, that they're in a place where they have already had that experience, gotten that out of their system, they can really focus on the task at hand. And so these are like some of the questions. Like Jim told me, he's like, I would love to do discretionary selections like the Dutch do. He said, that'd be great, but it invites controversy. It creates problems. You get that very American litigation streak going, like bad things happen. And so, yeah, he said like there's a simplicity to the automatic qualifier where it's like, listen, you didn't win. That's that.
Yeah. I kind of like it and dislike it at the same time. Well,
win or go home.
You're right. All right, Joe, thanks for the explainer. And once we have sort of finalized teams, you'll see them up on the site. We'll talk about them a little bit more on the podcast and let you know if anything else crazy happens.
Will we keep my Olympic near selection or near qualification? Definitely not near selection, but near qualification story for After Dark.
Yeah, let's do that.
Yeah.
All right, we're going to take a medium-sized break. Welcome back, everybody. The Dauphiné starts this weekend. Obviously, one of 2 major prep races for the Tour de France. We've got the Criterium du Dauphiné. We have the Tour de Suisse. Jonny, who's racing the Dauphiné?
Everyone, Caley. Well, not everyone. Not Pogačar. He's resting.
That would be a lot.
That would be a lot. Then I'd truly 100% believe Ronan's earlier point. Not Jonas Vingegaard. Remco Evenepoel is. Primož Roglic is. Juan Ayuso, Vlasov, Mads Pedersen, Carlos Rodriguez, Jai Hindley, Sepp Kuss, Jorgensen, Landa, David Gaudu, everyone and their mums is going to be there.
Generally, riders kind of split themselves up between Dauphiné and Suisse, but I wonder what is the Suisse?
Usually when it goes that way, I haven't looked at the Dauphiné route, but usually when it goes that way, there's something very representative of the Tour de France route included in the Dauphiné.
Well,
so I'm not.
They've
sure
had to take out 2 climbs, including the Col de la Colombière from stage 7 because of roadworks, which I love. Just what sport gets stopped because of roadworks. What it does mean is that I know who's going to win the Tour de Suisse, and it's whichever rider is leading the Ineos Grenadiers squad, and then they can turn around and point and be like, "Well, we won the Tour de Suisse." So
far,
be?
Tom Pidcock is going. Tom Pidcock.
Yeah.
I mean, the Tour de Suisse start list isn't bad. Carapaz, my guy Lenny Martinez, Joao Almeida, Enric Mas.
It's not quite.
Manuel Buchmann. It's not quite Dauphiné, though. I wonder. So Suisse is obviously just a little bit later as well.
I see.
But that may be.
It may be time to do Dauphiné, come down and go back up to altitude and come down for the Tour again.
When does it start? Saturday?
I don't know.
Suisse starts June 9th, and the Dauphiné starts this weekend.
Oh, great. So only got to wait a couple more days for more racing.
Every time we say Dauphiné now, I picture two things. First of all, is potatoes. That makes sense. But then secondly is hill walking, because 2 years ago when the Dauphiné kicked off, and this is related to new tech that we can expect to see at the Dauphiné, Trek unveiled the new Madone at the Dauphiné start 2 years ago, and there is always new tech at the Dauphiné. It's like one of the few races where guaranteed you want to see something new, and I'd been like keeping an eye out for it, and then I got like a Slack message. The one point of that like hill walk where I got like signal, I got a Slack message saying, "There's a new Trek Madone at Dauphiné." It's like, I can't do anything about it. I'm on the side of a mountain.
The Dauphiné is a super fun race to go to because it's the infrastructure of the Tour, but with about like a quarter of the people. So it's easy to find yourself everywhere. Like the start lists are always reasonably good. There's all the ASO people that we love to annoy. It's a good time. It's all in that the region that they hold it in is really good. There's like the selection for hotels is better. One of my favorite races I've done. Maybe not this year. We'll go back another year. You can hill walk up to Summit Finish, Ronan, and then find all the new tech.
Sounds good.
I'm just looking up where you can watch these races. So ASO, Dauphiné, the Criterium du Dauphiné is an ASO race, which means it'll be in the US, it'll be on Peacock, and in the UK, it'll be on Discovery Plus. Tour de Suisse is on Flow Bikes in the US and Discovery Plus in the UK.
What's that new Australian thing called as well? They're like Discovery subsidiary.
Stay Live or something?
Stay Live.
The Aussies will get the Dauphiné on SBS, and there is nothing for the Tour de Suisse at the moment. So, sorry, Aussies.
Good, all right. Good pun, Ronan.
Sneak it in there. You didn't even hear it.
No, it's good.
Huh?
Don't worry.
I didn't hear it.
You have to listen to the podcast and find out, Caley. It was worth it.
Oh, jeez. All right, fine. Wrap it up for today. We got a little mailbag to do, and we're going to hear Ronan's story about almost qualifying for the Olympics, and we're also going to do a little mailbag. The question came in from Buzz on Discord. Are time trial specialists like Ghana and Kung an endangered species? Are we witnessing a transition from Watt monsters to Aero monsters? If you want to hear the answer to that question, you got to be a member. You got to be on the member feed. So make sure you head over to escapecollective.com/member and sign yourself up.
Do it.
All right. Non-members, we'll see you next week.
Scram.
Members, hang out. We're going after dark.